Good morning, good afternoon, or for Aviv, good evening. I want to thank you very much for joining this webinar. My name is Charles Sterling. I'm hoping that you guys on YouTube can hear me right now. I see that I'm coming through, but I've got the audio turned down, so hopefully you guys can hear us. If I can get Hans with his 157 people from Norway, or Nine Dynamics, or William Pearson, or Donald, or just some guy to act that you guys can hear us, we'll go ahead and get started with Aviv. What's the future, what's now, and what's exciting for Power BI Embedded? Everything's exciting. Everything's changing for those guys. There's lots and lots of crazy stuff. And Anthony Bulk from Vancouver, Canada, just said that we're coming in loud and clear. So we're getting a little bit of static on your side, but I think that's your microphone, Aviv. So hopefully, when I hand the microphone for you and I mute me, so Aviv, it's a crazy time for you, huh?
It is, yes. It is a crazy time, and we are preparing for the June release, which should be mostly exciting for our customers, or at least so we hope. Do you hear me loud and clear? Should I start, or can I start?
You can start, and you sound great. Thank you.
Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you for joining. I hope to be able to share some of the excitement that we have here on the team with you guys. And we are talking about some new features that are going to be available for customers around the time frame of the MDIS conference, which is the week of June 12th. And let's go and start going through this, talking about what I mean by that. Okay, so generally speaking, and I think this is no news for most of you, our goal and our aim is to put the embedded analytics everywhere, because this is a great tool for decision making, and we think it could be great for every SaaS application that embeds it. So a little bit different from Power BI as an analytics tool. This is the ability to add analytics into your application. Now, if we look at where we are at with the last Magic Quadrant of the BI leaders by Gartner, we see we are way there up in the top, and we want to keep moving on to both to the right and up edges of that quadrant. So we'll continue and deliver on the promise that we made to you guys. Okay, so today, when we look at the two offerings of Power BI and Power BI Embedded, we see those as two separate offerings. There are, and this is being shown by both the difference in functionality and the two differences in the APIs, the Power BI APIs and the Power BI Embedded APIs, and differences in costs. So we've had enough of this, and we now want to make a change in such a way that will help us and will help you guys get things much easier and much faster and much like you expect it to be. So the three main things that we've heard from customers and which we are solving in this release is, first, and the biggest one here, is that all capabilities that are currently available in the Power BI service will become available for Power BI Embedded. This is a big thing, and it's one thing that's coming with it is the unification of the APIs. So again, if you had a chance to play with our APIs till today, you probably know that there is a different path to the APIs when using Power BI, the service, when integrating with it, and there is a different API path when you embed Power BI report into your application. Coming June, both of these would converge into a single API. In terms of scale and performance, so one way to deal with that would be because we deliver more data sources, and we'll discuss this a bit further when we continue this chat. Another way is also related to the new premium offer, which allows customers like you to build their solution on an environment with less noisy neighbors, or without any noisy neighbors at all. In terms of costs, we with the current model that we have, the most volume feedback that we've got was about the unpredictable costs. So this was the only service in Azure that you couldn't put a high cap on. You didn't know how many users or sessions you'll have for your service, and therefore you couldn't predict how much things would cost by using Power BI Embedded. All of this is going away in June with a new architecture that I'll share with you right now that will allow you to embed Power BI into your application to your external users. So let's go and start talking about more details than that high level. First, this is a short introduction to Power BI Premium. I'm assuming that most of you have heard about Power BI Premium, the offer, through the Power BI sessions and through the announcements made by Power BI. So the same premium dedicated capacity will be available for the ISV community. This means that you get a chance to purchase a dedicated resource for your own use. The scale and performance would be much higher than what you are used to, and you'll have the flexibility to license it by the capacity that you are using. So if you have large customers, very large customers, you'll be able to purchase dedicated capacities just for them, and you'll be able to do multi-tenancy of most of your customers in a capacity that you purchase on a standalone environment. There are a lot of abilities to do mix and match with those capacities, and we'll talk about that when we get to the architecture slide. If we look at the current way or the current flow of using Power BI Embedded, we are talking here, or we split it into three main steps or areas. The first one is creating the reports. This is happening on the Power BI desktop tool or with the Power BI desktop tool. The second phase is the provisioning phase, and this is done today through Azure, using the Power BI embedded resource, which is related to the Workspace Collection element, and then embedding it into your applications with the client-side APIs, with JavaScript. This is the flow as it is today. Again, Power BI Desktop to create your reports, the import APIs to get those into the Workspace Collection and then into Workspaces in Azure. Here, the Workspace Collection is used for both security boundary because of the secret keys that you get, and for the geolocation definition of your solution. And then the workspaces are used for as a boundary or a container for your reports. And then the embedded part, again, done through the JavaScript APIs and the connection to the only two data sources, not like the Power BI service itself. Coming in June, this is the new flow that we are going to introduce. If you guys had the chance, you might have seen this already in the documentation that Adam Saxton have created for us and for you guys. And I'll try to elaborate a bit more about what we are seeing here. So first, the create phase remains the same. You will create your reports in Power BI Desktop as you did till today. On the right side, the embedded parts will also remain the same. So the client-side APIs, the JavaScript APIs also are unchanged. The only change is going to be on the provisioning side and the REST APIs that are used to provision your solution. So instead of using the Azure resources, we are now asking that you guys create a different infrastructure to host and to embed your reports. It starts by creating an AAD tenant. Usually we'll expect that this AAD tenant will be a dedicated tenant for your application. So the most common case I would guess would be that for a single application, for a single ISV, you create an AAD tenant. This defines the geolocation of where your reports will reside. Then you add an AAD user. This is going to be the application user, and this is how the application, the ISV application, is going to be authenticated into Power BI. So you create a single user in AAD, and the credentials of that user are the security boundaries of your application. And again, your application being a multi-tenant application with external users that are not familiar to Power BI. Nevertheless, your application should be recognized and authenticated and given full authorizations to Power BI. And this is why we're creating the AAD tenant and AAD users. In order to have a container to group or to store reports per your customers, this is where you'll be using the Power BI groups or Power BI workspaces, as they are going to be called. Juno already called like that. So you see there is a total parallel solution to the solution you are using today, providing all the capabilities that are available today within the new framework that I'm just mentioning here. The immediate benefit that jumps here in this slide is the list of connectors. So once we move to the new solution, it means that all the data sources that are now available for Power BI will be available for Power BI Embedded. And if I go back to the statement I've made at the first slide, saying that performance might be improved, so this is one of the examples. If you use cached models now instead of direct query mode, you might get better performance because you'll have the APIs to keep the data fresh. Okay, you'll have the same ability to keep the data fresh as you have in the service with an API. And you can connect to all data sources. And therefore, every time your users, your application users load the report, they get it instantly. There's no need to go and run queries against the data source. That's one way. And then the second way is using the premium capacity. So when I talk about that, it brings me to the only thing on this slide which I haven't mentioned till now, and this is the purchase arrow. The purchase arrow is in the provisioning mid block here, and it points to an office icon, and it's not there. It's there on purpose because it means that today purchasing of both Power BI Pro and Power BI Premium will only be available in Office. On top of that, it's also there because it means that in order to start developing your solution, you'll have to have a Power BI Pro license. This license would be used for the AAD user, the app user. It only requires a single user for an application that serves multiple users on its authorization mechanism, and it only requires a single Power BI Pro license for the application. So development can start with a single Pro license, but when you are ready to move to a pre-production environment to start loading the system with multi-users, then we will ask that you purchase a Power BI Premium capacity, a dedicated capacity. You'll migrate your reports into that capacity, and then you can start multiplexing your external users to load the Power BI reports. Until here, does everything make sense?
There are a ton of questions. So let's start with the easiest one. So Nanda Kumar from HP.
Yeah.
Nanda, thank you for joining us. Does Power BI Embedded give you give you the same features as a SaaS service. FYI, in the previous, there was some features that were not available in Power BI versus the SaaS service. So let's start with these.
Yes, this is an easy question. Yes, all the functionality that is currently available in this service will become available for Power BI Embedded. In June, it'll be something around 80 or 90% of the features, and then going forward, we'll continue and close the remaining gap within the next month or two.
Okay. Tom, one of our internal guys, actually joined the call, and he's saying, so for each user, do we need to create a user in the AD?
So this is a great question, and I thank you for asking it, because I get this a lot. So the answer is no. For your application, you have external users that Power BI doesn't really know about. Power BI only cares about the single AAD user that is used for the application. Your application is authenticated in Power BI with the single AAD user. Once authenticated, it gets the full authorization, and authorization is being managed by the application using the embed token.
So you might even want to call your user something like sales user or West Coast user rather than a proper name. Does that sound about right, Aviv?
I'm not sure I got your comment again.
So the user name might be something like sales user, because you can actually use it for the sales visuals, or West Coast, because you might actually use it for West Coast.
Yeah, for example.
Yeah, okay.
But it could be any user of the application, a user that is not recognized inside Power BI. This is exactly the scenario for Power BI Embedded. It's meant to be used as an embedded analytics for users that are not using Power BI. That's the beauty of it. And this is done, by the way, by using the embed token. So when embedding a report, the application should also ask to get an embed token for their users, which Power BI does not know of. Okay, and the application defines which report and what data to show on that report to the logged in user for the application itself.
Nine Dynamics has clearly been doing some REST-based APIs. He's asking, does the application have to be registered in the Azure AD space as the new AAD tenant?
Yes. So the same way you register applications today for the SaaS service, you'll have to go through the same process of registering your application and using the AAD tenant and AAD user. Again, just a single user for an application.
And if you guys are doing it through the Azure portal, you're making it too hard yourself. What is the URL? It's dev.powerbi.com/applications, I think it is.
We can, yeah, I don't remember that by heart, but yes, there is a registration page within powerbi.com.
Okay, so here's the ones that we probably want to avoid, and I want to actually preface this with Aviv has been asked not to be talking about, or not to talk about the price points by our marketing for our announcement. So Aldous rates, apologies if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, the ability to scale performance and price is absolutely necessary. Yay! But the price of the low entry must be for small solutions, or you must have a price point for small solutions. I've heard that the smallest price point is around $650, which is too big. So not really a question, but it's something that I think it's worth addressing, is that the pricing that you're seeing out there right now is for premium. It doesn't actually scale to ISVs. And unfortunately, Aviv can't really talk about the pricing right now. Is there any more you wanted to say other than the fact that you can't say much?
Other than the fact I can't say much, I do appreciate the feedback, and we are looking into it. Okay. It's not the first time I hear of that feedback, exactly.
Aldous goes on to ask, what is the time frame for us to migrate your existing solutions into the new architecture?
So I have a slide on that. If you ask me, then immediately when we release. But then you'll have more time to make the choice on your own timing, of course. I'll talk about that in a minute and say what's the timelines for that specifically for each type of engagement you have with Azure.
Okay. And then Richard Vanderpool, I think Adam has already addressed this in the Q&A window, so you can feel free to defer it. Goes on to ask, does RLS work the same way as the current embedded solution, passing an encrypted user principal?
So RLS, let's even take one step further. Everything that you have today in Power BI Embedded and everything that you have today in Power BI REST APIs is being converged. This means that all the functionality will be available through a single API path. So, and now let's talk about RLS, because this is something with a caveat, and I thank you for raising that question specifically. In June, we will have support for static RLS. What do I mean by that? I mean that if you do want to use RLS, you'll be able to set up several users, like shown here. So instead of having a single AAD user, you'll be able to create, let's say, many users as you wish as roles. So for example, you'll create one user called sales organization, and the other user which might be called the finance organization, and so on and so forth. And when you log into Power BI, you log in with that specific user, and then when you get the data, you get it for that role. This is a limited solution for RLS, and we are going to solve it. The first phase will be for almost all of the data sources coming in July. So the dynamic RLS will come in July, where you can define in the embed token and say username equals the username function, and that will bring the username and will always show the data for that specific user. So this will be available in July to all data sources, but Azure AS, which will require a bit more work from our side in order to enable that. So I'm sorry that this is a very complex answer, but it's the most honest one.
Did you want to go on with slides or take a couple more questions?
We can continue and then take more questions.
Okay.
If that's okay.
Yeah, so Juan Alvarado is asking a question that's pretty easy. What will happen with the Power BI embedding that Dynamics is using, CRM's using, Teams using, who else is using that? Power Apps is actually using the existing REST-based API. What happens with those guys, Aviv?
Okay, so first of all, there is a mix of the two solutions in the question. So, for example, Teams and I don't remember the second one, Power Apps, are using the REST APIs of Power BI. So you must have an AAD user in order to embed those reports and consume those reports in the other applications. Those will continue to work as they are today. The other places where the Power BI embedded solution was used in order to allow to embed reports and share those with non-Power BI users, these will continue to work the same until they switch their solution exactly like you need to do. Okay, so if, for example, if Dynamics, I think that Dynamics is also currently only embedding reports with the Power BI REST API, so the same answer goes for them. But where we have an application, even if it's an internal application, which is basing its solution on the Azure resource, they will have to move to the new APIs, the same as you guys.
Okay. And Tom, I think he's poking fun at us more than anything else, is saying, will this change come with a decent set of ALM tooling? And I want to take a swing at this one because that's my background, my pilot house. Now that there's only one API and one paradigm, Tom, it's going to let the team actually start creating that. Before, they would have had to actually create parallel in both cases, and you can actually already see that working. So Jay actually showed with applications where they can actually copy an entire application from one work group, but this is going to enable us to start working on that. Aviv, did you have anything more to say about ALM tooling?
Yes, so ALM, I have a few things to say about that. Actually, I'm not sure everyone noticed some of the new features that we have released in March, and we kept it quiet and didn't make a big fuss of it because after we released, we started understanding that the next step would be to go to converging the APIs. But some of the things we released were related to ALM. So reports could be cloned and rebinded to data sources. This means that as an ISV, you can create a set of out-of-box reports that you keep in a group like shown here in Power BI. Then when you onboard a new customer, you get the APIs to create a new group in Power BI and to clone the reports, the golden reports, to that new group and to rebind those reports into the right data sources that will show only the data for the new customer that you onboarded. So the whole process of onboarding a customer will be fully automated. Okay? And then when you want to make changes to reports, you'll have the same capabilities to replace reports, rebind them to the data sources. Everything will be fully automated.
Kirill asks a great question. I don't know. Oh, actually, I think I do know the question. Will Power BI mobile app work with Power BI embedded? We're talking about
today or in June or today it works, but I don't know. It works in a funny way. It's an HTML hosted part. What we are going to do right next to the June release is to start working on that integration. So we will support the layout of the report. So if you are aware of the fact that you can define a mobile layout for reports as well, so we'll start supporting that. Hopefully by July, we'll have at least something which is good enough to start using as an embedded part within mobile apps as well. And then we'll continue and develop that and make sure that we get to the same converged solution where all the functionality that you see in the mobile app for Power BI will become available through the embedded part as well.
Nine Dynamics brings up a great quote question or point that we hadn't even talked about. He goes on to say, are we going to be able to make the switch? Oh, we are going to make the switch to premium ASAP, but in Azure Analysis Services connection in embedded in Azure would be great as a bridge. So I think what he's talking about now that you're actually going to be using the full back end of the full PowerBI.com service, the ability to go out and do connections to all the different data sources. That's correct, right?
Yes. So again, we'll have the ability to connect to all data sources. In June, we will only have static RLS. Again, like I mentioned before, you can define roles here by different users and then connect to Power BI with every time you connect, you decide on your side which role is mapped to which user that logs into your application. And this is how you choose the user, the AAD user, to log into Power BI and get the data from Azure AS according to that role. Looking forward, again, for Azure AS, it will take us more than July, but this is work that we are starting immediately. We'll support the dynamic RLS, where you can also set the username in the embed token and then set RLS in AS, in Azure AS. I hope this makes sense.
Richard Mintz is wanting to make sure he understands when you said rebinding. Does that not mean the service will also be able to rebind a report to the new data source, i.e. going through dev test prod?
I'm not sure I got the question. Could you repeat that?
So he wants to make sure he understands that rebinding will be able to take his report and actually rebind the data source itself. As you move from different work groups with the different reports, will also rebind to the different data sources.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly it. You can This is the scenario that I mentioned with regards to the ALM story. You create a golden report based on fake data, right? Or maybe this is I don't know, some kind of data in order to help you build the report. Then when your user logs in, you want to connect them to a different data source, but provide them with a report of their own. So you'll clone the report from your golden group or golden workspace into the customer's workspace, and then you'll bind it to the data source that contains the customer's data.
Perfect. Okay, well, there's a couple more, but why don't you go ahead and get back on slides, and I'll see if I can't triage some of these questions with Adam in the chat window.
Okay, so we'll continue, and then I'll be happy to answer more questions if I can. Okay, so let's talk about what this means, and this is to get to talk about the same experience that we just did, but talking about each of the boxes separately. So for the create experience, again, as I mentioned, the create reports experience is being done in Power BI Desktop, and it will remain in Power BI Desktop. But at this time, it means that you can connect to all the available data sources, direct query, cloud-based data sources, on-premises data sources, or using the cached models with refresh. Everything will be supported now that you import your PBIX into the service. And I've heard some customers implementing a cached model by doing the refresh of the PBIX outside and then importing it once a day. So I don't like this solution. I understand that you had to do it. Coming June, you won't have to work like that anymore. You'll have the way to use cached models with refresh. Either you'll have two options to do the refresh, for example. You could do refresh through the Power BI UX. So as the ISV, you can log into Power BI and set up tenant level settings and things like refresh for data sets. And on top of that, we'll provide you the APIs. So for example, with regards to refresh APIs, we'll provide those so you can set up the refresh for the different data sources through your application. Again, this would be in line with the service limitations. So as long as you are in the develop mode, for example, and you haven't purchased the capacity, you'll be limited to the same number of refreshes as the service provides. So with a pro user, I think it's 8 refreshes for a data source. But once you provision a capacity, a dedicated capacity, and then promote your data sets and reports into that capacity, then you'll have a lot more refreshes. I think it's about 40 something refreshes. So it's a big difference. In terms of the provisioning experience, again, I'll repeat the things that I mentioned before, but it's important that you understand those. Provisioning today is being done in Azure with Workspace Collection as the security boundary and the geolocation definitions, and the Azure Workspace as the report containers. Going forward, you'll be provisioning an Azure AD tenant as end user for the security boundary and the geolocation definition, and you'll be provisioning Power BI groups or workspaces within Power BI as the report containers. So there is a total parallel solution. In terms of payments or the costs of the service, so until today you've been charged by sessions. And going forward, you'll need to have a Power BI Pro license for the development phase. And when you're ready to move to full end-to-end testing with user multiplexing and to production, you'll have to purchase a premium capacity. Now, I know on top of that, the value that you get from that is that, for example, you'll be able to publish reports directly from Power BI Desktop. It wouldn't require an API. So if you have an analyst on the team that works on Power BI Desktop and you are granting him access to a workspace in Power BI, which is the, I don't know, it could be a temp workspace where all reports are being uploaded, then that analyst can do that from Power BI desktop. And then you'll promote the reports once they are approved from one workspace to the other, and have a full ALM story for promoting reports from the level of, from the designer desk into your production environment. Everything could be done with the APIs. Another thing that will enable is APIs for gateways, for on-premise data sources. The refresh that I mentioned just now, and what's the last line? I can see it. And there are tenant level settings. So for example, I've had a lot of questions about disabling export of data through the embedded report. So this is something which is part of the tenant level admin settings, and you will be able to control that either on a tenant level or on a solution level, application level. By the way, we are also adding the capability to export to Excel. So this is another feature that is currently only available in the service and not in the embedded report, and we are adding it to the embedded report as well. Just thought it might be interesting for you guys to know about that. So for the last part of the embed experience, again, today you are embedding using the Power BI embedded APIs. Going forward, or starting June, we'll have the full set of functionality in the Power BI REST APIs. So everything you have, or you know, or you are familiar with, and much more than this, will be on a single API path. Access rights are managed with embed tokens today in Power BI Embedded, and they will continue to work like that. So we are enabling embed tokens for the Power BI APIs. This means that you can embed reports and let external users consume these reports, just like today. The immediate benefit here, if you're familiar with some of the functionality which is currently only available for the SaaS service, is dashboards. So we will provide the ability to embed a dashboard and the tiles of a dashboard as single objects in your applications as well. Until now, we talked about only good stuff. Now it's time to talk about some of the harder parts, or some of the things that you guys will have to take care of in order to enjoy all the goodness of the new functionality that is coming. And this is to migrate your solution. We've built a process here to show what a migration process would look like. And on top of that, we'll provide both the APIs as building blocks to help you create an automation process around that. And of course, we'll also provide a tool which will make your life much easier. I'll also add that the migration process could happen in parallel, so you can keep your current model running. Everything could be ran, and in parallel, you can do a full export of your topology and reports and a full import into Power BI to start developing or updating your application to work with the new APIs. And only when you're ready, you can decide to switch, and this could happen in an instant moment without having to go through any downtime, not for the migration, nor for the switch to the new solution. So I think this is very important. Let's go through the migration process here. We split it into the 4 phases, where the first one is migration for the reports and the deployment topology. So we are adding an export API for the current service. You'll be able to export all your reports, and you'll be able to export the topology, meaning that if you set up your topology in such a way that you've defined a single workspace collection, and then workspaces as your multi-tenant topology, then we'll create for you, when you use our tool or when you use the APIs, we'll create for you a topology map exported into an XML file, which will show you how everything is mapped, which report is residing in which workspace and workspace collection. This is a file that you can later on manipulate manually if you would like, because when you import the reports into Power BI, you can use this format to create everything automatically. So, and this could be used later on for creating a new environment or a new one-box environment for your development purposes. Using this file, you'll be able to automatically set up the whole topology. So as the first phase, you have the APIs to export everything. The last step here is to purchase the Pro license, of course, in order to create the AD tenant and AD user and map those to Power BI Pro tenant as well. In phase 2, here you rebuild the deployment topology in Power BI using Power BI groups. So if you noticed, in Power BI embedded in the Azure solution, there were 2 levels of the topology. You had Workspace Collection and Workspaces. When you go into Power BI, you only have Workspaces. So we will provide an automation that will allow taking the Workspace Collection name and merging it with the Workspace name and creating a group by that name. Again, like I mentioned before, we will allow you to set the name on your own. So you can decide whether you want to use our tools, whether you want to write your own business logic to create the topology before you import it. But then again, you have a file that you can use as your topology map before you start the import process. If you saved all your PBIXs out of Power BI, you can use those, use the source of the PBIX files wherever they are at for the import process. So you understand, we build a tool and the APIs to allow you to build the tooling to go through this migration process as smoothly as possible, and it can be done totally separately. You can decide that you want to do the export one day, and then take your time and build your topology and decide how to make the import, and you can decide that you want to do it instantly, and you'll be able to, through 3 clicks of a button, to get a full migration, just so you can start playing around and understand what it means. So everything is in your hands, and you have all the choices to be made here. In step 3, we are talking about migrating your application to the new Power BI APIs. So we'll release documentation, of course, with the help of Adam Saxton, which is on the call, I understand, and he's already working with us to create the new APIs. And I'll give an example what this means. It means that if previously, when you called, for example, get reports in your application, you used an API path which said with the Workspace Collection ID, get all the workspaces, then with a workspace specific ID, get all the reports. So moving forward in June, you won't have workspace collections anymore. So the API will be the same API, get reports, but the path to that API will be based on the user, the AD user, which is used to authenticate the application into Power BI. So the same API would be called by defining the user that connects, and then the workspace by the workspace ID. I hope this makes sense. If it doesn't, I can answer questions if those come up. And of course, you'll have all the documentation that will help you get more familiar with everything I'm just talking about. We'll have some samples, of course, laid out for you to show you what we mean by the changes that I've just mentioned. Now, the second step in phase 3 is to say that when you are ready to move to production, you need to migrate the workspaces in Power BI into the premium dedicated capacity. And then you are allowed to use multiplexing and authorize all your users to consume the embedded reports that are in the premium capacity. In the fourth phase, which is, again, a phase you can decide whether you want to do it or not, we'll provide you with some APIs to clean up after you go. So you can delete all the workspace collections, and when you do that, we'll delete everything that is contained in those workspace collections. I'll go till the end. I know there might be a lot of questions, and I'll be happy to come back to any slide and talk about any of those subjects, but I think it will make sense to finish. I think I have only 2 more slides, if I remember correctly, then collect all the questions. Okay, let's see. In terms of the transition timeline, so if you have an enterprise agreement, and this agreement is 3 years long, then you'll have access to the existing service for as long as your agreement is on. Otherwise, or if you are direct, then we are going to keep the current solution on for at least another year. That's the timelines. What it means, by the way, that new customers, when they come into Azure and try to create a workspace collection, they won't be able to create a new workspace collection. Only existing customers with subscriptions that have workspace collections could continue and create workspace collections and continue and work like that for as long as their agreement terms are provided. In terms of guidance, based on the stage you are at, we know different customers are at different stages of implementing our current solution, and this is why we wanted to mention that or to give some advice here. If your application is in production, then you should continue and work with the service as it is and start planning for the migration to the new offering on your own timing, of course. If you are almost in production, then you should evaluate the value that you get from using the new APIs and determine your best approach. You can, of course, release or get out to a market. And we know that you have commitments to your customers, which are also with deadlines. So if it makes sense, go live as is today and start planning for the migration later on. But if you are just starting the design or the prototyping phase, we advise that you today start working with the REST APIs. There is already a document published by Adam again to show you the new flow that I just talked about and to guide you through enabling or making that work. Not all APIs that I mentioned here in this call or all APIs that are going to be available in June will be available for you, but you will be able to run through a POC with the current Power BI APIs. So this is regarding our advice. I think this is it. As mentioned by Chuck, and maybe worth mentioning again, I cannot talk about the costs of the new SKUs. I can just say that the premium capacities that you currently heard of from the white paper by Amir Netz, we're going to add 3 more capacities that will be only available for the embedded scenarios, only available for ISVs. Those would be 3 capacities with lower costs than the P capacities, okay? And of course, we'll share everything once we can. We are currently working on a calculator, so the current calculator for Power BI premium capacity is specifically for the service usage, and we are working on a calculator specific for the ISV scenario. We think it's a bit different. It will be based on report renders or page renders instead of users. But it will help you come to or make the calculations and to understand which capacity you guys need. In any case, I think we can say that it's not only that the prices are going to be predicted, they're going to be even better than what you were familiar with until today. That's it for me. I'll be happy to take more questions.
I think Adam's been getting most of the migrating ones and API, but I want to read Richard Mintz's verbatim because I'm not certain I understand it. Richard Mintz says, if we are a pay-per-play customer, are we still going to be given a 1 year from June 1st to migrate or find another solution?
I'm not sure I know what's a pay-per-play customer.
Yeah, nor did I. But I know that if you have active users on, what was the date? May 1st, we're going to go ahead and give people a year trial extension for those pro licenses. And if you were a free license that were actually active, we're going to give you a pro license.
So you're talking about the Power BI Pro license?
I think that's what he's talking about. I'm not certain. That's why I read it.
Let me try and maybe give an answer that maybe answers the question. If you're referring to the current service, then the current service will stay up and available for customers that are using it for at least 1 more year after we release the new capabilities. It won't have any new functionality going forward, only the things that are currently enabled there. In terms of what you get when you move to the new flow, yes, it's mentioning that you need to purchase a Power BI Pro license. So in order to get, if you have, and I think this is where Chuck's comment was true, if you have already a tenant with free users, then those would become a Pro trial for another year. If you do not have that, then when you sign up to Power BI, you'll get the 2 months Pro trial for using or building your POCs. And then you'll need to pay, after the 2 months, you'll need to pay $10 per month for Pro license.
It was your former answer. He actually went out and said, he was actually talking about the rendering behavior versus the new behavior. How long will that infrastructure exist on Azure? So it answered it initially. Mark Hirsch, he's asking about something entirely different about MongoDB. Miguel Lopez, who owns the Data Connector, says they're going to not start until after H2, but it does not take that team long to build a Data Connector. So MongoDB is not after H2.
And maybe this is an opportunity to say that, again, since we are taking everything which is available in the service, these questions will be to the folks who are running the service. So every new data connector that comes to the service will be automatically available for us as well.
Okay, and Simon has a long comment on how difficult it is to manage users and groups in Active Directory, but that's not Power BI specific. You could go back and read it after the fact.
But again, it's an opportunity to say you do not need to manage users in Active Directory. You only need to create a single AAD user. That's all. A single AAD user to authenticate your application inside Power BI. So if until today you created a Workspace collection and you got a secret key, and using that secret key, when you logged in, when you authenticated your application with Power BI, you use that secret key. Instead of that, what we are asking is that you create a single user and use the single user credentials to authenticate your application in Power BI. That's the whole thing. Other than that, the whole security and authorization for external users remain the same. Your users are external. We do not know those users in Power BI. Okay, so there's no need to create more than just one AAD user. No hassle, or there shouldn't be at least.
And Adam brought up a great point, is that with the new custom connectors, you can actually write your own. You're not limited to our team. And now that the new Power BI Embedded is actually leveraging all of the resources of PowerBI.com, you get to take advantage of that. Okay, so I went out and asked him if I missed any questions, and I'll read Robert Barnes. What happens if the customer does not migrate within 12 months? Will they lose all the artifacts in Power BI Embedded?
We call him and tell him, no, 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 bad customer. I don't know. We'll have to deal with that when we get there. But generally speaking, we are terminating the service, the current service.
Okay, Mark Hirsch. And actually, that's to Adam. Perhaps I can have my tech lead connect to you. Oh, okay, right. He's actually talking about the data connector. Philip, my good friend from Focus. The M-SDK extension is great for doing what you need, Mark. Okay, so they're commenting against each other. Luis has gone out and said, for Power BI developers or Power BI embedded developers, will they require a pro license or they can use the master AAD account for that? So I know the answer to this one. There's very few that I do. Creators or authors are going to need a pro license, and then your consumers can go out and either use pro or premium, depending on which one makes the most sense for them. So that one, I understand. Developers need a pro license. So they're going to have to fill out the whole $10 per month or whatever you actually pay, because I know a lot of big accounts don't pay for that. Aviv, I think we've run the queue dry. Adam has done a great job of answering the questions. I want to thank the 100 people or so that joined on and the many that will follow on. Did you want to go ahead and close the call?
Yeah, sure. I'm good.
All right, I'll see you at the Data Insights Summit. Adam, Aviv, of course, the 100 people with Philip and Donald and Udras and Mark and Thomas Day, etc. So thank you very much, guys. And this is Chuck, and we're going to make it a close.